The next time that guilt taps you on the shoulder and you're saying to yourself, ooh, is this okay? I feel selfish. I want you to ask yourself, is it really being selfish? Now, selfish is when you are only thinking of yourself, when you're exploiting others. Is this act actually just allowing your needs to get a look in? Is this self-honoring? And actually, who else could benefit by you investing in yourself?
Welcome to the Choice Space podcast. I'm Dr. Lee David, GP, CBT therapist and author. In today's episode, we're talking about being selfish and how we might reframe what that means. For many people, the word selfish can feel uncomfortable. It might bring up fears about letting people down, being uncaring, or putting yourself first in ways that feel wrong. And over time, that can start to shape how we live. We push ourselves to meet expectations, often without stopping to pause or check what we need. Guilt can show up when we try to set limits or say no. In this episode, we're going to explore what happens when we pause and look at things differently. When being selfish is not about taking more, but about taking responsibility for our own needs, our energy, and our boundaries. I'm really delighted to be joined today by Suzy Reading, chartered psychologist and author of How to Be Selfish, as well as lots of other really brilliant books. She brings a thoughtful and grounded perspective on boundaries, self-worth, and learning to put yourself back on the list. Suzy, welcome. Could you start by introducing yourself and sharing a little about what drew you to write your book?
Well, thank you for such a lovely, warm welcome, Lee. I'm so looking forward to our conversation today. So, I'd love to give listeners an understanding of where my toolkit comes from. So, from a professional perspective, I'm a chartered psychologist. I specialize in supporting people through stress, loss, and change. I'm very passionate about helping people develop sustainable, healthy habits. And all of that is wrapped up in a deep desire to help people heal their relationship with self. In addition to my work as a psychologist, I also spent a previous decade of professional life working as a personal trainer, another decade working as a yoga teacher, and I love to bring those different modalities together to empower people with nourishing skills and habits. But I do want to preface all of this conversation with an understanding that it was actually my life experience of becoming a mum at the same time as losing my father that really showed me how vital self-care is. But also, I would say that in the experience of perimenopause, I understood it wasn't just about caring for self, it was also feeling comfortable with receiving care from others. And that's what prompted me to write How to Be Selfish, because I think we've got such an aversion to being seen as selfish. We revere selflessness so much, and it really keeps us stuck in this feeling of not enoughness for having human needs. So we need this conversation, Lee, don't we?
We absolutely do. And I really love your book. I've read it and I think it's so powerful. And thank you for sharing some about your personal experiences, because I think there's so many demands and it can be really difficult. I think we often do get squeezed out of the picture. So everyone's needs are on the table and it's like ours just don't quite count as much as other people's. So I love the idea about being selfish, but I'm wondering, when you wrote the book and when you use that terminology, do people see the word differently? Because sometimes people do look on it as a negative thing. So how would you see it differently?
Okay, so if we can look at the cover here, and for those of you who can't see, the title of the book is How to Be Selfish. It's not how to be more selfish. It's written for people who couldn't be selfish if they tried. But the word selfish is split into two. There's a big self, and then underneath that is ish. What this is about is reclaiming the right to self. I'm encouraging people to reclaim self, to reclaim the right to feel, the right to have needs. This is, I want to be completely honest. I was a little bit nervous about this title because it really is, it's quite shocking. Yeah. But this is about healing relationship with self. This is coming home to self and knowing self, respecting self, accepting self, approving of self, and also feeling comfortable to represent ourselves so that we can actually have more meaningful and authentic relationships.
I love the idea of a relationship with ourselves, and it feels a really important way to look at it. A lot of the people who perhaps will relate to these issues will be people who are very caring and, as you say, are not going to be selfish in the least. In fact, the opposite will often be very selfless. And you do talk about that in the book. And that idea of selfless if you break that up, that's very interesting as well. It's like myself is less than other people's selves, which I think says a lot actually about how we often approach how we're supposed to show up in the world. And I think it's really interesting, and it's so important to be able to notice that and then maybe just move away from that idea about being somehow a good person means that I can't matter.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I wanted to write the book, to take a look at the reasons why we're so fearful of being selfish and even to recalibrate our relationship with selfishness. Because for so many people, when they label themselves as selfish, when they're feeling guilty, what they're doing doesn't actually constitute a selfish act. So, some examples. A lot of my clients will say, I feel selfish when I'm resting. I feel selfish when I'm offering an opinion or making a request or a suggestion. Some people even feel uncomfortable with receiving a compliment. I think the biggest one for women is that they feel selfish when they're showing up honestly in relationships and letting people in with their emotional lives, leaning on people. Some people feel uncomfortable even accepting the love and support that's offered, let alone asking for it. So this is why this conversation is really important. I would encourage people to interrogate, when you're labeling yourself as selfish, is that actually selfish? Would you call someone else selfish if they were engaging in that same choice?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the people I work with are very caring and really put a lot of energy into supporting others in lots of different ways. And guilt shows up all the time. And one of the things I would say is that guilt is a sign that we care. It's a sign that we have values about wanting to support others, but it's not a sign that we've done something wrong, that we need to do more, that we need to change what we're doing, or that we're somehow to blame for something. And I think trying to let go of the idea of that guilt is a signal that we've made a mistake or that we're not enough, and just recognize it's a signal that I'm just a really caring person. This is a situation where I really want to care. And I think it's then extending that to, it's not competitive. It's not them or me. It's like, how do I care for everybody in this situation?
I love that, Lee. I'm in 100% agreement. The presence of guilt doesn't mean that you have transgressed your moral code. It's an opportunity for us to check in. And I think that the fundamental thing here that you've brought to the light really powerfully is that we need to allow our values to also include ourselves. So if you think about that beautiful desire to be a loving, compassionate, kind, caring human being, it's okay for that to be more flexibly expressed, to also include yourself. It's okay for your kindness to have limits. It's okay for your generosity to have limits. We are not a machine with infinite capacity. But this is where we've got to interrogate the concept of selflessness. And I think probably from my own life experience, I don't know about you, Lee, but I've definitely desperately wanted to be the selfless mother. Yeah. I really wanted to give every cell and fiber to my children. Now, what I've learnt the hard way, and I would describe that as energetic bankruptcy, I've learnt that my depletion serves no one and my replenishment serves everyone. And I think the way that I'm sort of navigating changing my relationship with selflessness is thinking about, okay, when I'm attempting to be selfless, actually, what are the values that I'm aspiring to? Now, they're generally things like, I want to be present. I want to be patient. I want to be loving. I want to be caring. I want to be available. So the question is, what do I need as a human being to resource myself to show up as those things? Being selfless is actually the barrier to all of those beautiful capacities. If I've denied myself, if I've abandoned myself, I can't be any of those things. So let's quit aspiring to selflessness. Let's observe it as selflessness isn't the virtue that we've been led to believe. I believe it's a coping mechanism. that helps us try and fit this social mold of the good girl, the ever-present, loving, giving, our worth contingent on how well we've serviced everyone else. We've desperately tried to do that, and selflessness is the way that we've learned to understand how to survive.
Yeah, I see that a lot. I sometimes use an analogy of seeing ourselves like a car and, we don't go to the petrol stations. We don't even put in a few pounds worth of petrol. And then when we get to a big hill, we put our foot down and we expect ourselves to be able to drive up it. And then we kind of get out and start kicking the car when it slows down, and eventually we'll burn out the engine because, there is a limit to how long you can keep going without resourcing yourself, isn't there?
It is. I love that metaphor. That's one that I use as well, Lee. We need to be resourced just as we diligently charge our mobile phones. We don't malign our devices for being needy or weak or lazy or indulgent. We charge them. Yeah. And if only we could respect ourselves in the same way, well, I think we'd get a different result. I think the message that I really want to highlight is that it's not just about you servicing yourself. People need people. Self-care alone is not enough. We also need to be witnessed and validated and comforted and understood and accepted and cared for. Yeah, that's the missing piece.
I'm interested, Suzy, where do you think this comes from? I mean, it may be cultural. There's probably lots of reasons, but it feels like it's almost become normalized. It's more likely that we show up as selfless than the opposite. I'm wondering where that comes from.
So when you look back through eons of time, we're a social animal. We relied on each other in hunter-gatherer groups for collective survival. So you can see from that perspective, it would be deeply undesirable to be seen as shirking your responsibility because you might be cast out and left to fend on your own. So yeah, don't be lazy. Be seen to be pitching in. So I think it's in our DNA. It's in how we've been reared as children. We still have this idea or this notion of there are good babies and bad babies. And a good baby is one that doesn't cry, it sleeps well, it doesn't trouble its parents, it's malleable and pliable. And I think we're so desperately just trying to be that good human being. But I think we associate good with not having needs and not having feelings. And that's not human. So let's quit trying to be this good human. Let's just allow ourselves to be human.
Yeah, that's so important. One thing that I see, the last thing I ever want to do is put a guilt trip on hardworking mums who are doing their best in every sense of the word. I think sometimes when we don't put our needs on the table, maybe we've had a parent who didn't look after their own needs, then the culture of a family is, well, this is how a good parent behaves. We should ignore our own needs. And inadvertently, I wonder if we're then training our children to absorb that message that actually, if I want to be a good person, I mustn't look after my needs. And we feel like we're doing our best. We're really trying to show up amazingly. And it's driven by this love and care, but it does have backlash and it feels really hard. But actually not looking after ourselves also creates a message around what it means to be in a family, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And this is something that I've learnt in my motherhood journey. If I wanted to raise compassionate, resilient children, if I want my children to feel comfortable with their humanity, I have to show up in my humanity. I have to embrace my humanity. And to be fair, the extent to which we can share ourselves with our children is dependent on the season of motherhood. In those early years, your baby wakes at night. You can't just roll over and say, well, not now, right? You have to be responsive. However, as our children grow, I think more and more we can share our emotional lives with them to let them know that we feel sad, we feel lonely, we feel disappointment, we feel anger, we feel joy, we feel contentment. When we share of ourselves, we actually help our children. It normalizes feeling, and feelings are a cue to our human needs. So this is so important that we're allowed to express ourselves. Yeah, allowed to feel all of our feelings, right?
Exactly. And we don't have to overload our children with our emotions. We can be like, I feel a little sad, but it's okay. I'm okay. It's okay to be sad. And they don't have to be fearful or, I'm okay. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to go for a little walk. I'm going to sit quietly. I'm going to do something, or actually I'd really love to play a game with you. And actually that will cheer me up. So we have choices, don't we? When we're sad, we can sort of model different responses to emotions.
Now, that's a very important point, Lee. We're not burdening our children with our feelings. We're not saying to our children, you now need to fix this. There's no responsibility there, but there is a sharing so that they know that these feelings are normal. And this is what we can do to support ourselves in these feelings. And so that's what I think of as emotional first aid. And I think it's a real gift when our children can see that's what you would do in that circumstance, and it's okay to talk about it and it's all right to share. And if we share, they're far more likely to share their emotional lives with us.
Yeah, and actually they're then more able to share how they're feeling. Maybe they're sad at school, maybe there's something going on that they haven't wanted to talk about, and feeling that it's okay to be able to share that actually I feel anxious, or I'm feeling a little sad. Maybe that then will enable that dialogue in both directions. So it feels like it's a win-win really there, doesn't it?
It is. It is. When we model selflessness, we're denying our children all of these things. It's so important.
In your book, you talk a little about boundaries, and I think they can be very important. But I think people sometimes misunderstand what they mean and think it's just saying no in quite a sort of strong way, whereas I think it's more complex than that. And I'm just wondering what your take is around boundaries, why they're important, and how we might go about thinking about them.
Okay. Yeah, I think boundaries is complex and it's challenging to do. And I don't think that we were reared with these skills. I don't know about you, Lee, but this is certainly, I've heard the notion of, a good child is one that doesn't talk back to adults, right? If you haven't learnt how to honor your boundaries in childhood, it's very difficult to just magically develop the skill in adulthood. The thing that helps me understand boundaries is a boundary is not a wall. It's not something that keeps people out. And it's not always rigid. Sometimes it can be a co-creation, boundaries with one person. So for example, your boundary with your mum might be different to your boundary with your dad, different to your boundary with your husband, your friend. It's specific with each person. And it's what you need to feel safe and healthy in relationship with that person. It's kind of just giving clarity so that you know what the rules of engagement are, what's okay, what's not okay. But we do need to get quite granular. And that involves a conversation, because boundaries can be very loud in your head, but unless they're articulated, the last time I checked, people aren't good mind readers. There has to be a conversation. There's got to be some kind of agreement. Okay? So we make requests of people. So for example, a concrete request would be, if you want to come over, you need to call in advance. Please don't just turn up. That's the request. And then you would hope that to have some kind of agreement from that other person. The boundary is, if that person shows up on your doorstep, presses your doorbell, and they haven't rung first, you have every right not to answer the door. Okay, so the request is what you would hope to happen. The boundary is what you will do if that request is or isn't honoured. So it puts you back in the driver's seat.
So that sounds really empowering, because I think what often happens is people get caught in trying to control how other people see them or what other people perceive. And so we focus a lot on something that really we have very little power about, what other people think. As you say, we can't be mind readers and we can't really change people's emotions or thoughts. What we can do is change our own behaviour and respond to that in whatever way feels appropriate.
Yes. So the boundary has to be what you will do. And it's got to be something concrete. So another example would be if perhaps there is a problematic relationship with alcohol within the family and there's a family gathering. The agreement, the request might be, I'm happy to attend as long as there isn't alcohol involved. Okay? You go to that event. If that's not respected, then your boundary is you have every right to leave. So that's what you will do. You've got to choose something that allows you to be in the driver's seat. But for us to be able to do this is where we need to be able to honor self. And you can see how selflessness gets in the way here. And for a lot of clients I work with, they feel like, but it's unkind for me to do that. And it's like, do you know what? It's okay for you to protect yourself. Yeah, it's all right for you to honor what you need to feel safe and healthy. And if you think of it, if what are the consequences of you saying yes here? What are you then saying no to? How will that affect your ability to parent or to show up in your professional capacity? You have to protect yourself, and that's what boundaries are all about.
It sounds like that also ties back into where we started, which is talking about needs. And when we think about going to that example you're talking about, there may be so many needs, and it may be, I have something important to me is I do want to connect with my family. And I also want to care for myself. I want to look after my physical health. I want to model behavior around alcohol for others in my family. And I want to have autonomy. I want to be able to choose things that matter to me, and I want to feel safe. So that it feels like there's so many different needs. And actually, when you're just focusing on, I need to make the other people happy by doing what they want, we're missing all of the other things that actually feel really relevant, that actually make it such a more complicated decision. It's not just a black and white, do I go or not? It's so much more at stake, isn't it?
It is. And I think that's really important to acknowledge, Lee. I think sometimes when we're thinking about values, we think, well, that makes it a black and white decision because it's either in service of that or it's not. But it's sometimes there are competing needs. Sometimes there are competing values. So, for example, our desire to be a kind, generous human being might come into conflict with us being authentic, honest, to be able to protect other aspects of life. I think that's the other thing. You can look at kindness through the lens of my role as a mum, but perhaps I'm also looking at that through the lens of me being a daughter and also a wife and a sibling. It's complex. But I think we do need to allow self to factor in here. Because if there's one thing I've learned, that if I continually deny myself, I will be no good to anyone. So we just need to allow self to feature in that decision making as well.
Yeah. And so if we're keeping that self as part of it, then we might think, oh, well, I really want to make sure I do connect with so-and-so. So I'll reach out to them and we'll arrange a different time to. So it's not like this one event is the only way to meet the need of, I want to connect with my family. I think we just need to be creative sometimes and think more broadly, don't we?
Yeah, I think that's a really good suggestion. How else can that need be met? It doesn't have to take this shape. What else might allow that to be honoured?
This is the Choice Pause, a short 2 to 3 minute tool drawn from my books and therapy practice that you'll hear in every episode, each time with something different to help you pause, notice, and choose your next step. Today's pause is about making one small choice that cares for you. You could use this at moments where you feel tired, under pressure, or where guilt is starting to show up. Take a slow breath in and a longer breath out. Let your shoulders drop a little. Allow your face to soften. For a moment, bring your attention back from all the pressures of life and focus on you. Notice how you are right now, not to fix or change anything, just to check in. You might quietly offer yourself a few kind words, as you would to someone you care about. Perhaps, "It's okay, sweetheart. I've got you. I'm here. This is hard. I'm here to support you." Now consider one small choice you could make that might support you, even just a little. Something simple, realistic, something that fits the day that you're actually having. It might be a short pause, stretching your body, a few minutes of movement, stepping outside and looking at the sky, getting some fresh air, or giving yourself permission to take a break. If hesitation or guilt shows up, see if you can meet it kindly and keep going anyway. This is about choosing yourself gently, not perfectly. Take one more steady breath and carry this with you, the option to check in, speak kindly to yourself, and make one small choice that cares for you as you move through your day. I know you do talk about this in the book, what helps us to be able to think more flexibly is if we're able to notice and regulate our emotions and find ways to step out of threat mode and feel less triggered. And then we are a bit more creative and we do have a more flexible approach anyway. And I'm wondering where that ties in how you work.
I think it's absolutely fundamental. If we want to be able to take action in service of our values, it helps us to shift out of the stress response and into rest and digest, where we can empathize with others, we can think with clarity. And it's so important that we cultivate these little pockets in our day where we connect with self, we ground, and we soothe our nervous system. Because otherwise, being in threat mode means that we're constantly being reactive. And it also means that we're missing out on all of these cues from our body mind saying, sweetie, you need to down tools. You're starting to get overstimulated. Now you're picking up your phone and you're cycling between emails and WhatsApps and social media. And it's, you're going down this rabbit hole of depletion, which it's going to make it harder and harder to make good choices. Yeah, we need to carve these little purposeful pauses where we can connect with self. Should we do a practice, Lee?
Oh, I'd love to. Yes, please. Definitely.
Do you have a glass of water or a cup of tea with you?
I do. I have a cup of coffee here.
So the reason why I want to pair this ritual with something that we do, how many times a day do we take a sip of something? I want to pair it with drinking because it helps us remember to do this check-in. So I'm going to pick up my glass of water. So whatever it is that you're drinking, can we tenderly place a hand on our heart at the same time? And then with that hand on heart, what you're saying to yourself is, I'm going to give myself a moment just to check in and observe without judgment, without criticism. I'm going to come home to self. Now let's take a little sip and just notice how it feels. Can you feel how the hand on heart gesture really heightens the sensory experience of drinking? I hope everyone's trying this at home.
So do I. So I can really notice my body is settled a little bit. Like I've done an exhale and let out some tension that I didn't even know I was holding. And the hand on heart just is a sense of pressure and warmth and feeling a little held, which I think is really powerful.
Yes, it provides a little bit of comfort. What this hand on heart gesture is, just to explain, this is a grounding gesture. Your body knows where it ends and the environment around it begins. Now that's really soothing and settling for the nervous system. So we can ground ourselves with a hand on heart. We can ground ourselves by feeling the sensation of our feet against the floor, or if we're sitting, our sit bones against the chair. You could press your hands up and down your thighs. It reminds us that we're in this body and that we're in this moment, because so much of unhelpful thinking is ruminating over what happened yesterday or worrying about what's about to happen next week or tomorrow. So this gesture brings us back into our body. It brings us back into the now, and it soothes the nervous system. And with this practice, we haven't quite finished yet. So after you've taken that little sip, I want you to ask yourself, where am I at? What is happening for me right now? Check in with the body, just observe. Maybe there's a bit of creakiness somewhere. What kind of emotional tones are floating about? Can we just make space for them? Where's your head at? And based on those observations, can we ask ourselves, what do I need now? And can you imagine how life is transformed by this regular check-in? Because that's where we'd say, do you know what? I need to go to the loo. I just wanted to get that email done, but actually I just need some relief, or I need to eat something, or I need some fresh air, or where's the cat? I just want to sit with it on my lap for a moment, or I need to have a conversation with another human being. Yeah, all of these things might take 30 seconds to go and do that thing. That life changes when we make space for our human needs and our feelings.
I love that practice so much. And I love the fact that it's bound up with something that we do so frequently, but without thinking, and just creating that pause, that habit stacking when we do something regularly and then we add something onto it that then adds an extra dimension to make it more helpful, to make it more positive. It feels so, so important. And I have seen the value in really busy people of taking these micro pauses where we do just pause and check in. People sometimes think, if I can't go off and do an hour of relaxation, what's the point? when actually we don't go from 0 to 100 in terms of stress building up. And likewise, we don't need to try and bring it down all at once. We can just notice, oh, I'm a little bit tense. I just need to go for a walk, as you say, stretch, have that drink. And it's a message as well that says, I do matter. And I'm just going to make a little bit of time. And so back to that relationship idea, it feels like, if we had a relationship with somebody else and we never did anything nice for them, it wouldn't be that great. So it's kind of like treating yourself as if you're a friend that you cared about, because in my experience, people sometimes struggle with the emotion of, I feel I want to do it, but it's hard. And so sometimes if we just do the behavior of, well, what would I do if it was a friend? Or what would I do? What are your thoughts around that?
I think that's really crucial. I think for a lot of people, they think I have to feel worthy of the tender action, the nourishing action before I can do it. Don't wait to feel worthy. In my experience and what I see time and time again in my consulting room, the feeling of worth actually comes from the tender action. So go and do that nourishing thing. I think even this action of putting hand on heart, even if you've checked in and you've noticed a need, and perhaps there isn't the space to go and then meet that need. You can't just go and do the thing that you want to do. But what you can do is you can say to yourself, I can be tender with myself in acknowledging there is this thing that I'd really like to do and I can't right now. Maybe I can make space for it later. I can make an appointment with me on the weekend. I can be tender with myself. And I tell you what, it's so transformatively, isn't it?
100%. It really is. So I really enjoyed that practice. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. Do you have any other suggestions for how people can start moving to develop that relationship with themselves that supports them to step away from the idea of selflessness and maybe to a broader idea about seeing ourselves as worthy and developing that sense of worth through our actions?
So there's something that I'm doing at the moment that I think is an incredible assertion of self-worth. I'm setting the intention for this year to seek or AWE every single day. So I'm an awe hunter. And what that means is every day I'm on the lookout for little moments, little glimmers of wonder, curiosity, human connection. I try and go for a walk every day because I find nature's beauty is an infinite source of awe. But it doesn't have to just be watching a sunset or seeing the fractal patterns of frost. It could be savoring a piece of chocolate. It could be watching a motorist pause to let a pedestrian cross or seeing someone walk along hand in hand. This morning, my awe was seeing a kingfisher fly overhead, right? It's that my dad visits me as a kingfisher. But the thing is, when you become an awe hunter, what you're saying is that actually, do you know what? My pleasure matters. My joy matters. And the incredible thing is, when you set the intention to look for it, you notice more and more and more, and you become more present to these little glimmers of joy in life. And it's really transformative. So I would suggest you could be on your commute and be an awe hunter. You could be having dinner and be an awe hunter. It's like a lens through which you see your day. But I think it really has a fundamental power in changing our relationship with self because, as you say, this is what allows us to say, do you know what? It's okay for me to live like I matter too.
So it's not about, I need more stuff, but it's much more about slowing down, taking those pauses and noticing what we already have in those moments, what already exists that actually is a moment of awe that we might be missing if we're not paying attention.
Totally. It really wakes us up. It brings a beautiful presence to our lives. And if you can do it as a family, it's beautiful. When your children will share with you the awe that they witnessed in their day, it's incredibly bonding. And it gives us something to talk about.
So awe hunting is great, and I'm going to try and focus on that. I'm going to share it within my family and maybe start having conversations about what we noticed today that brought a little sense of awe. Do you have any other tools that we might use that can also help us to support ourselves?
Yes. And I think we definitely need things in the heat of the moment, don't we, Lee? It's not always possible to just nip outside and get that little dose of sunlight that we crave. So what I would suggest here is that there are different ways in that will soothe the nervous system. So we've done this gesture. This is touch. We're going to do one practice that actually brings them together. So this is where I get to put my personal trainer hat and my yoga teacher hat on, but I also get to still wear my psychologist hat because this is mood boosting. This is changing our energy. Let's do a practice that involves movement and breathing. And it's got a silly name. So everyone, I want you to have a little chuckle while we do it, but hopefully also it'll help you remember it. It's called the chicken wing shoulder roll. So we need to pop our fingertips on our shoulders to make our little chicken wing. Now, as you breathe in, can you lift your elbows up? And as you breathe out, can you take your elbows back and down? Okay, so notice we're going up, back, and down because what that's doing for us is it's drawing us into a tall, upright posture, which research shows helps us feel a little more effervescent, a little more optimistic. It also connects us with a feeling of personal power. Okay, and we also know that movement has a mood boosting impact. And you might not have noticed it, but this is a breathing practice. Breathing in, elbows up, breathing out, elbows down. And the simple fact is, when you breathe better, you feel better. Okay, so maybe 10 of those. Do you know what? We've just dropped our day from our shoulders. We're feeling a little bit more poised, a little bit more capable, and now we can re-enter our day.
Yeah, I was holding tension there in my shoulders and I've just let that out and it's like an exhale. And I love the way that also you end up in a position of strength as well, where your shoulders are down instead of in the fear position where we might be hunched and ready for danger. So I love the fact that it brings us back into that position of strength and power as well.
Yeah. And easily done. We're talking potentially 30 seconds, but these little practices can be powerful circuit breakers.
That's fantastic. So, obviously, if you've got time and you want to go and do a run or go for a walk or go to a yoga class, amazing. But if you don't, then actually that's okay. There are things we can do, right?
There are. Think along the lines of movement, touch, breathing, using your senses. And the last one is please, 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 all the kind, coaxing words.
So let's just finish with a little about that, because I recall earlier you used a very kind word when you were talking about yourself and you said, oh, sweetie, that's really tough. And I know you do mention that in the book, and I don't think we naturally do that because it's, again, something that we could just maybe start to lean into that feels like a small change that people might use. Could you just talk a little bit about why that matters and what we might do?
I would love to. Can we just make a quick distinction between thoughts and self-talk, though? Because this is really important. The first thought, you don't choose. And if you don't choose it, stop trying to control it because it's out of your control. And I want to say, as a psychologist with nearly 30 years of private practice experience, I still have toxic, unhelpful, catastrophic thoughts. But what I've learned is that is not me. That thought is not necessarily true. It's not necessarily a prediction. It's not a fact. I get to choose what I believe is true. Where we have control is our self-talk. So forgive yourself for whatever that first thought was. We do need to respond to our thoughts in a way that is encouraging, that nurtures the life that we want to live. Please speak to yourself with dignity and respect. Okay, and self-talk might feel pretty automatic, but I promise you it is something that with conscious, deliberate choice, you can learn how to cultivate kind, encouraging words. Now, this is the thing that this is really interesting. Research shows that if we refer to ourselves with our self-talk as you or I, it naturally cultivates more punitive, judgmental self-talk. However, research also shows that if we refer to ourselves using a term of endearment, a pet name, we naturally use kinder, more coaxing language. So that's why, peppered through all of my social media posts, peppered through the book, the way that I talk to myself is sweetheart, darling. And my personal favorite, I'm very happy to share mine, I call myself Bunny because I can't be mean to Bunny. Who could possibly be mean to Bunny? So this is everyone's homework. What's your pet name going to be? Lee, what's yours?
Well, I'm thinking one of the words that I would use with people is, okay, lovely. And that's something that I would use with my kids. Hello, lovely to see you. And it may be quite a British one, but actually I could say that to myself as well. And it feels very different to perhaps to you, which, as you say, capital Y, quite judgy, quite demanding.
Which then often follows with idiot, right? Yeah. But lovely. It changes the way that the tone. And honestly, it is life-changing when we speak to ourselves with that tenderness. It changes our nervous system functioning and we start to feel deserving of more actions of nourishment and care.
That's such a beautiful place to finish our conversation, although I think we could keep going and going. But we always like to end with a choice-based takeaway, which is some actionable steps that people could do to try over the next few days or weeks. What would be the things that you'd be encouraging people to try as their first steps into this?
The next time that guilt taps you on the shoulder and you're saying to yourself, ooh, is this okay? I feel selfish. I want you to ask yourself, is it really being selfish? Now, selfish is when you are only thinking of yourself, when you're exploiting others. Is this act actually just allowing your needs to get a look in? Is this self-honoring? And actually, who else could benefit by you investing in yourself? That's the first step. So let's really do some unpicking about selfishness and selflessness. And then secondly, if we want to be able to live a life that's infused with personal meaning, we need to nourish ourselves. And if we need to nourish ourselves, we've got to check in with self. We've got to know what our needs are. So please, can we engage in this practice on a daily basis, hand on heart, while you're drinking, check in. Where am I at? What do I need? And lastly, I want to broaden the conversation from you just meeting your needs all the time. I want you to let other people fill your cup too. Yeah. If you think about, I want you to keep loving other people, being generous and caring in your nurturing. I want you to allow yourself to take care of self. But the missing piece of the puzzle is allowing yourself to receive love and support too. And I tell you what, we need that not just for our health, but the health and well-being of our relationships. People want to be there for you. Don't deny them the joy of supporting you, and feel how that really allows your relationships to bloom in unexpected ways.
I love those. And I would just build on it and add, if we go back to the petrol analogy, if we were a car, think about going to the petrol station regularly, multiple times a day, and just putting in a tiny little bit of fuel. And what does that look like? What different needs can we meet? And practically be creative and think about what would work on this day and what would work on a day I'm at work, what's helpful on a day when I'm maybe acting as a carer. Don't be like, if I'm caring for my parents, I can't do anything for me. It's like, can we weave in a little bit of self-care?
Some chicken wings.
Yeah.
Yes. We can always chicken wing.
Chicken wings flapping. Exactly. Yes. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Suzy. I've really loved this conversation.
Such a pleasure, Lee. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Choice Space podcast. I hope this conversation has offered a little more room to pause, breathe, and find your own way forward. We've linked to Suzy's fantastic book, How to Be Selfish, and all the ways you can connect with her in the show notes. If today's episode has been helpful, please download, follow, and share with someone else who might value the space as well. I'd love to have you with me for the next episode. Until then, take care and keep making space for what matters most. This episode was edited by Elle Dixon.